pain. At least
Hello,
like
you're
how I
you're
should have a
listening to
clean-ish house when you come
another
over. When you come
interview
over,
hour with
we will watch movies and
your
eat
host,
pizza,
me, John
sing
Rippinoff.
embarrassingly, and
And
talk
for
about God
today's
under the
episode, we will
covers.
be listening to a recording of a dialogue
I
um,
don't know. Do you think I try too much or try
being
too hard?
moderated by Sarah
Um,
Krajewski, the new director of Innova,
oh, this isn't going to
with
work. I thought I could
Michelle
get
Grabner and
internet.
myself on the occasion of Michelle
Um,
Grabner Innova survey. So I hope you enjoy.
that this is
Sarah
kind
was
of
most
interesting.
recently at the
Maybe you've
Henry
heard of
Gallery in Seattle.
the video game
has
Black
made the trek
Ops.
here to Milwaukee. We're just very, very pleased to have her. Sarah,
found
I'm
out
going to
that
let you introduce
the
our stars for the day.
main
Sure, thank you. Well,
villain
thank you, Scott,
Black
and it's a real
Ops,
pleasure to be
they
here in
revealed that
Milwaukee, and I
in
had
Black Ops 2,
a great time meeting a lot of you last night,
the
and
much
please
anticipated
come up after
sequel,
the program. I'd really love to get to know all of you as I embark on
actually
this new chapter, and
revealed
it's
that
my pleasure,
he is
too,
the
to
leader of the
introduce John
99%.
Rippenhoff and Michelle Grabner for our
So-
conversation this
I know, there's
afternoon.
that. And there's
Before we get
also,
started, though,
Bad
I
News
wanted
coming
to say some thank yous because this was really a community effort in getting this show together. We had a number of
a lot of
volunteers come together to help us install,
fodder about,
and I'd just like to call out their names: Madeline Schweitzer, Harvey O, Sean
Like there's
Blatt,
sort of a class
Laura,
war
Laura
going on.
Volkert,
It's
Richard
commentary
Galling,
on
Brian
Occupy Wall
Delyden,
Street.
Rob
And
Rippenhoff,
of
Kelvin
course,
Whitehurst, and Eddie Villanueva.
Batman.
I don't know if any of you are here today, and if I missed any
Bill Gates,
volunteers, just
Romney.
raise your hand. We really are really grateful for
These are all
your
people of
for your
independent-
help in bringing this all together.
So-
There were also a number of lenders to the exhibition
you know,
that I'd like to
it makes
recognize, including the Milwaukee Art
total
Museum, Shane Campbell Gallery, the
But,
Green Gallery,
I
Tori
wanna read a
Folliard
poem by
Gallery, a
Lisa
number of private
Robertson.
collectors, and many of the exhibiting
This is
artists
from her book,
also
Lisa
lent work from their
Robertson's Magenta
studios.
Soul Whip.
And really, there was a core
actually,
team
before
behind
I
this
do
show,
that,
and
I
it's
should
been
mention that my guest on
it's a
tonight's
wonderful show,
will be
actually. I think for
coming
me
by
to start with
in
my
about
tenure
10
here at
minutes
Innova,
is
and I'd like to
Carl
thank Brad
Safran.
Killam for
Is that
he's not
Carl?
here with
No,
us
yeah.
right now, but
And,
extraordinary efforts.
I've known Carl since
Bruce Nackert, again above and beyond the call of duty with this exhibition. So.
years. I met him playing
If you didn't go upstairs last night at the opening to
passed
see
away
the
around 3
Suburban
years
Gallery
ago.
or the simulacrum of a Suburban, I'm calling
we
it,
were
that
all,
Bruce built in the parking
Liddy's-
garage.
Liddy's
We'll go up
boys,
there after
I guess you
after the
could say.
conversation. And of course, John, thank you so much for stepping in and curating
he likes
this
to take his
exhibition.
students out
And
and buy
Michelle,
drinks.
without you, we wouldn't
And,
be here today. So,
was-
so thank you.
it was a lot of
And
fun,
also, just a
and
quick
it
word.
was,
I'm sure all of you know about
was
the fire that
edifying.
happened recently on Center Street and the
edifying.
many artists who were affected by that. I just wanted to mention that if
Carl
you're
is also
interested
the
in
bookstore
supporting the
manager at
relief
Woodland Pattern
efforts,
Book
you
Center.
can find out more at the Milwaukee
And he's the
Artists
author
Resource
of,
Network website. They have a
um,
fund that's been established for the artists. Around
much
town,
lauded
you'll see
poetry chapter, Dead Wrestler
donation
Sonnets.
buckets, and there's one here on the desk.
I'm hoping he might
And there's
be
a number
coming
of
tonight, but I
fundraising
don't
events
know
that
if
are
he'll
coming
want
up as
to.
well. So please go to the
Yeah, I found out
website
they're
and
actually going to be
find out more
teaching the
about
Dead
how you
Wrestler
can
Sonnets
support
in English class.
for
Someone who
this.
teaches at,
So,
I think,
So
Kansas University.
let's, I hope that this will be a very informal and
So this
casual
is
conversation, and I've just
by
got a
Lisa
few
Robinson
questions I
album.
thought
This
I
is,
could use to get things
spontaneous
rolling, and then
restaurant.
we can open it up if
After
anyone has
Lucretius.
any questions
And
as we go along.
it
I'm
starts
sure
with
that
a,
if you
quote
guys are
from,
open to fielding
Epicure.
questions from the
Absolutely.
audience, that would be
The
great.
cry of the flesh
The first
is not to be hungry,
topic
thirsty,
I'd like
or
to
cold.
address is, I think,
For he who is
community is on
free of
everyone's
these and is
mind these
confident
days with
of
the
remaining
recent
so might
events.
even
And
vie with Zeus
both
for
of you
happiness.
have built communities around
And then there's a
your
note.
work as artists, and I thought
In order not to
if
be
you could
hungry, I made a
describe
restaurant.
your
I made a broth.
communities and how
I made a
they
perishable
play a
structure
role,
of
or
comportment
if they
shaped
don't
by the
play a role
synesthesia of
in
eating.
how you approach your work
Here we
as,
linger
as
and
artists,
nibble
writers,
according to the
curators.
shapes of need.
Do you want to go
Perhaps
first?
the restaurant tests the
Sure.
possible relations
I'll
of
go a little bit
chance to
first.
meat.
I wanted
Perhaps
to
it
say thank you,
reciprocates
Sarah,
need
for
and
helping out
thriving.
everyone that
It
you
poses
mentioned,
a nutritive situation rather than
and
a
that it's an
volume.
honor working with
The
Michelle and
restaurant is a
her
receiving
team,
device. It asks
Brad, and
what precisely
family
is
and friends,
required in the moment.
and that actually my
I want to
relationship to
study the
Innova
refreshing flora
is
within
one
resistance.
the first
I
introduction
want to
was as a
relax
student,
also.
or it was like
I want
kind
health
of
and resistance
one of
to
the
carry in synesthesia.
most influential
I
resources
want
I
to
had
move
as a
on.
student at UWM.
Thus I am thrown
And then
headlong
also my
into
relationship
transcendent
with
things.
Michelle, I didn't study under her directly, but I
Hey,
kind
Carl,
of
you can have a seat if you want.
I
I'm gonna read
did
this
study
poem
kind
by
of
Lisa Robertson.
on a trip that you had planned with your
That's okay.
students that I kind of
Lucretius
I don't know,
said
snuck
that the
onto
flourishing
or
must
kind of
absorb more than we exude of elements,
in New York.
minerals,
So
and forth. We call this food
I think
that
that
fabricates us from the
it's
inside.
an honor to kind of
But much
have
does drip and
a
escape
wide
from
range of
corporeal
relationships with
tissues.
not
We
only
use
you,
this
you as a
excess to make
personality
believe.
and your artwork,
It is normal, therefore,
but
for
also
the body to
this
perish
whole
from incessancy
institution
of
and
belief.
kind of
In the
it feels very
meantime, how
familiar
about a
and
milky
intimate anyway,
pablo,
and it's an honor
nut
to
meats quickened with liquor,
curating the
the
show.
iron of blood
So
sucked, the
I guess
iron
my
our blood
community,
sucks from
a
root.
description of my
The
community is
delicate
pretty.
and ingenious bodies we call pastries, or most
I think it'd be
intimate
pretty
aspects of
layered and
animals,
complicated, but I think in a
honey,
real
sap,
direct way,
and other lucky
especially in this
seepage, various salts and the slightly bitter textures of leaves.
the environment of this
From the
show,
fortuitous concourse
like
of
you mentioned,
atoms,
there's a lot of
blonde
volunteers and people
foams
that stepped up. I think
dripping vineyards,
in
these
Milwaukee,
curved
where we the
spontaneously out
funding
of the perishable
for the
dirt,
arts
clots of
is
rubbish
present, but it's
washed
not
up on
as
shore became us. Similar
in the
yet
philanthropic
unrelated
way. It's not
swerves
as
coasted each fruit and
prevalent
bouncing
as in some of the
pasture,
more
which
bigger
now
art
with
centers
eager
in
effort
America and the
we're
world.
hard-pressed
And I
to
think that a
husband.
lot of times
We use up the
artists
cattle
are
and their
supporting each
heels.
other, and I
We
think
use
that.
up iron. Dirt's tired of giving. We sigh at our
So
expired
in a
work,
real like concrete
envious
way,
at the
it's
luck
just
of our
you know,
parents.
people coming and
We
helping
walk to the
install,
bar again with
people
stooped
platforming
shoulders.
each other's work.
Some say the
And I think
soul
going
is
into
made of
this with
wind.
Michelle,
Others say it's full of blood.
she
They
was
are
very
certain
open
and
to
don't
me
need
being a
this
curator
information.
that's coming from an unconventional
Some,
place,
shut out of their homes by politics
not really
and
coming from an
circumstance,
institutional
far from their siblings,
background,
plagued by grief,
where
continue
you know
to
I
pace
basically
through their
learned
ritual
from
acts, judging and approving.
artists
Bad luck
in my
wakes others
community
up to
about what the
actual voices
definitions or what the
vibrating
models
from
of
torn open breasts.
and the expectations of
Why should the
galleries
fear
and
of death
museums
feed them?
are supposed to be, you know,
Why
through
do we
being an
kick
artist
over the
assistant,
supper tables
through being
of both cousins and
collaborator
strangers?
in different
We
range
must
of projects.
transform what we are as
And I
hunger.
think for
Lucretius says the soul. the
I think
speaking
that
thinking
Michelle
force
early on
flows
kind
through
of
a
made
girl
it clear to
is
me
part
that
of
she
life,
wanted to
not
look
less
at this
than
in a
hand,
way,
foot,
even
or
though it's an
eyes are
entire
vital.
20 years
He
of
says
her
that
work
thought is of
as
the
kind of a
hungry body,
collaborative
not
effort
different
in a
from
way,
limbs
really
and
open
senses.
to my
He says fragility sustains us.
my
I mean,
handling of
even in
this as an
effortful
artist,
situations, there is a
which
delay,
is
a minimal
extremely
interval
generous,
where
and I
we
think
turn
that's
towards hurt.
a
This
huge
delay
theme
could be
in all of
consistent with
Michelle's
deep reverence
practice.
without cause.
So
Say the girl or animal again wakes up, desiring
other
voluptuous
descriptions of
brilliance
my
in summer Latin,
community
of incredible lightness and smoothness,
are
incredible
directly
fineness
the
and
artists
smoothness,
and
in a kind of
our
direction
community in
both up
Milwaukee,
and down,
which over
since
the
she
last 8
suddenly
years
used
of
to be
running a
absent.
gallery here have grown
Say
to
there
be
is
an
a
international
surplus of
audience
speculation.
or international group of
In this way, we are
like-minded
not restricted to only
art
fallen.
workers, and
Let's
they
take the
work.
totality of an animal.
These artists,
Some
collaborators
bone,
work at
blood in the
on all
veins,
different levels,
heated
from
fluid of the gut,
like major
nerves weaving a
within
form,
major blue chip
fattening some
galleries and
method.
major museums
Finally, you see
to
corpulent
just
color,
community art,
tasting and absorbing dirt,
DIY,
and a language
like
suspends
apartment
itself
galleries.
as if falling. Any correction is
But
arbitrary,
maybe I
monstrous.
think Michelle's community is probably
Now,
more
attend to
important.
veritable something
No, clearly not. And a matter of fact,
fresh
I will
and
herald
approach,
Milwaukee
reveal
in
its
this
wild fragrance.
little summary of how I think about my
Ease was
community.
first
But I think, you know, as most of us
unbelievable,
know,
outside,
the idea of
stunning,
who,
seeking
you know, just
admiration.
who are our peers,
Then it
who are our
becomes the color of
colleagues,
the
you
sky
know, what is a
with its
network,
various
what is
startling
an
components.
institution. Those things start to get
Everything is for the
really,
first
they move
time
around very
immortal,
fast.
improvised,
And they
surging
should
to
move
the look.
around very fast. But
Nothing
we should
else
also be able to
foams
identify
toward me.
particularly our peers,
Nobody
I
lifts
think.
their eyes to no
And it's
romantic,
kind of great. I have a lot of
impractical,
peers here who used to
extravagantly
be
ideal
students,
conditions.
right? And they're also represented in the gallery, and they're also here in the
ideal
audience. So,
schemes.
you know, those
No
things, that's an
impossibly
example of those
ideal,
things
visionary,
changing and
chimerical
shifting.
perfection.
You know,
Having
I
no
was in
human
Milwaukee for
location,
quite some time,
silly,
you know, coming
inevitable,
from the valley in
elsewhere,
Wisconsin to the
coming to
big
the
city
scale
of
of no
Milwaukee
parties,
when I went
no
to graduate
path,
school or undergraduate
no
school
other
in
danger
1980
and
and then
alarm.
sticking around
The institution of
through most
social
of the
longing
80s
fell
and only
nowhere,
sneaking down to
in
Chicago
no
to get
direction.
an MFA at
The
Northwestern Western, and then
to the
coming
side
back
of the
here
left,
immediately.
nor the right,
This
nor
place,
up high,
I
nor
credit
lowering,
Milwaukee and its
limitlessly towards an
interesting,
uncertain
I'm going to
sight,
say lack of
intemperate
hierarchies
and no
in
determined
terms of how one
direction
can
of space
move
and with no
around.
determined
When I was
time.
here year
in
after
no
grad school, I
untimely
started
place
writing regularly
is
for Frieze.
a
I
thing
saw this kind of
prime
amazing
itself
international
by resorting to
magazine
light,
on
and then
a book
to take hold of
on a
semblance
shelf in a
and call it
bookstore.
nothing as dirt
And I
and sap
approached them, and I was
strewn with
doing, I
habit,
was writing
and lacking a better
criticism
verb,
mostly
I
from
promote
Chicago and
this
Milwaukee for
inauthenticity
Frieze,
in
and
the earth
curating
is
a lot of
tipping
shows
dish
here, and didn't know
where
that you
chance
couldn't do that.
means
Like
its
there was
messed
just,
up
this is just
items
the milieu of
entirely
Chicago. This
apart
is
from
what, or
intention.
excuse me, Milwaukee, of what
Finally,
Milwaukee
some
can handle.
combination
And then,
happens to
you know,
originate an appetite,
I kind
and we
of,
are still
you know, going
rotating
to
on
school,
doubt. How did we
my
come to
husband and I going
negation?
to school in
A
Chicago at
spontaneous
two
horizontal
institutions,
restaurant begins where
and coming
utopia
out
ends.
in 90, 91.
Lucretius
You
invented
know,
it
the
in
goal
Book
was
Two.
to always get back to Chicago.
You have to
once one
realize
can
that
afford it.
elsewhere,
We'll go to Milwaukee.
parallel to
Milwaukee's
reality,
nurturing. You can
also
you know,
spontaneously resists our will.
we had young children. We
Placed
could
here the catalog
deal
of
with
hungers.
time and
Call
expenses
it
in a
the
kind of a
future.
great way. But it was always about getting back to what we thought were our colleagues
set,
and
Carl?
faculty and so forth.
Just gonna
And we
turn
did.
the
And in
microphone up.
1997,
Thanks,
we
Michael.
moved to Oak
Okay,
Park.
I can hear you now.
And I always
you
kind of
doing?
regret that to the day. As
I'm
much
great.
as,
That
you
was
know, I like
wonderful.
Chicago, I have, you know, it provides us, we both, my husband and I
The
both have
battles, you know,
great
TV,
teaching
police
jobs down
cars
there.
outside, and
There's something
sitting here
about how
smoothly
the
saying unctuous
creative
bullying,
imagination
like
can
you've
work
done it a million
here,
times before.
and where
I'm a
Chicago,
total
we have
sucker for
really
unctuous-
strong
unctuous
hierarchies. There are
bullion.
institutions, there are players
say no.
who
Bullion?
really
Is that how you say it?
take hold
You-
in
I
that
don't know,
city.
you're the professional
And I'm
on-
not
on
saying
two
that they're
different
not here,
levels.
but it's more.
Would you say
it's
you've
more-
ever
it's more
had,
horizontal.
like, a
And
real
I like that a
French
lot. So,
dinner?
and it's dangerous being up here for a
Like
whole week
real,
installing
like,
the show
French
because my
food?
husband was actually
the
timing. He
fanciest
was going
meal
back
you
and
ever
forth, and I was
had?
staying here, so he was
Interesting.
timing the 90 miles to see if we could actually do
had-
the commute. So you may have us back in this community
Large egg.
before
I
long.
forget where it came from now,
And I don't,
but,
you know,
at one point I had a
often
large
I
egg
get some
fried.
grief about
Is it like
kind of
an
ragging on
ostrich egg?
Chicago.
I think it was quite that big,
And I
or
don't
maybe
mean to do
goose.
that. We have
Goose egg?
amazing,
Yeah.
we do have amazing
This was
institutions.
pretty rare.
Institutions,
me
art
it was. It was a
institutions,
bit
art
much
programs. You
egg-wise.
know, we have 5 of them that offer master
Was
degrees
it like
in
a
Chicago. So
scrambled egg?
Chicago is
It was
really
sunny side
orbits
up.
around
Really?
Yep.
that
How-
platform as
how
well. And I
big,
think
like,
that's
you
terribly
compare, like,
interesting.
a
But you know,
softball?
since
Sure,
we've been down
sure.
there, I think again
It
taking
was
the attitude
about,
of what you know the almost one should do whatever they want from Milwaukee and imposing
Frisbee
that in
golf.
Oak Park. I mean, the
Frisbee.
Suburban, the exhibition
Why?
space that we've run now
The
for
yolk
nearly
was the
15
size of a
years.
Frisbee?
No, the
Or
whole
the
egg,
whole
the whole
egg?
egg was
we
the size of a
didn't
Frisbee.
think
The yolk
that
was,
people would say no to us if we
baseball
asked,
sized,
you know,
and
people
about,
from New Zealand or
3/4
London
inch
to
thick
come and do a
yolk.
show in a small cinder block garage in Oak Park, and people said yes.
Where did you have that?
You know, I
Where-
think it's
where was
harder
that in
now. I
Milwaukee?
think you
No,
know the
that
art
was
world
at
has
the
grown
Bachelor
huge.
Farmer in Minneapolis,
Everybody is an
Minnesota.
artist, and I
Bachelor
think you know,
Farmer,
a lot of those things that
that's
happened
Oh.
10, 15, 20 years ago
What is
.com?
have different
Is
contours.
that any connection to the show on ABC?
But yeah,
The
I don't know if I
Bachelor?
answered the question about community, but you know, kind of
Yes.
volleying 2 different communities, you know, all of 90
The
miles
official
apart.
show.
That's where they get
Well,
all
the
the participants
structure
are
of the
picked from the
exhibition
audience of
does
that place.
suggest a sense of
Thus the
community
farming
in
aspect
some
of
way,
it.
kind of something extended over time.
Yeah, did you
because
know
you've got
there's a-
small
there's a
selection of
spin-off
artists
called
who've
The
been your
Bachelor
mentors or
Pad?
professors in the past, and then
I thought you were gonna say
in the
The
kind of
Bachelorette,
ripple
which,
effect of how of former students' work
Is that,
that are in
is
the, in
that
the
the
back
same or
gallery,
different
and
as
I'm
Bosom
It's
really,
like all the rejects have to live
interested
together.
in this
Oh,
format
mm,
of the
and fight each
exhibition as
other.
a
That's nice to give
It's
as
like
not your
that,
garden
yeah.
variety
It's like that
kind
Big Brother
of survey
show.
show. You know, those are
yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of sometimes things
You
that
don't
are
have any
covered in a
brothers, nor do
catalog
I.
essay
We have
or
that in
other
common.
other ways. But
Yeah,
here we have
you
the
have a little
works
sister?
of art speaking to each
younger.
other
How
in
much
interesting
younger?
ways.
2,
And
3, 4,
um,
3.
Oh, okay. My
I'd
sister's
just
like
like to
8
hear
years
more
younger.
about
Yeah.
When did we
how-
meet?
how this
When did- it
format
was
for
at
the
Von
show came
Trier, right?
together, and was it a process of
I think it might
collaborating
have been
with John
James
as
Lee's
two artists and
apartment or
thinking
Von Trier, I don't
about
remember.
Yeah.
a survey
Okay.
show, or
Yeah, I think
Well,
we,
no, I
we've
think what
debated
John
that
was saying
before.
about coming
I thought I met you in
at
Von Trier.
the
Could've
idea of a
been.
mid-career
Yeah,
survey,
yeah.
which, you know, it's
And-
something
and
as
you
artists,
were there
you
with
know,
Jim
it's-
Chapson.
hopefully we
Probably, yeah.
get that, we
Yeah.
get that offer at some point.
What
But it's
were your
also,
first impressions of me?
really unsettling
Of you?
in
Yeah.
terms of how does one fix something that one doesn't see as fixed? I mean, I just see it as a practice, as
I'll
process,
tell you what
it's
mine were
ongoing,
of
it
your-
evolves.
of you
So all of
I'd
a
rather
sudden to
hear
have this and
yours of
fix a
you.
narrative
Do you
on
want me
it
to
was
go
really
first?
hard for me to get
No,
my head
you
around.
have to-
So John
my
was
first
amazing
impressions
in
of me-
terms of
Yes.
thinking this through, and
I'll
you know,
piggyback.
one thing that you know, the
mean
result,
like
this
during-
wall here was a result of
during-
something John
during
said
the
in terms
mirroring
of thinking about
stage?
it as
When I
a
first-
quilt. I I think you
song,
saw
I
maybe an
realized my own
exhibition or something that you're talking
corporeality.
about compressing all these things
In my-
together.
in my
And
memory,
what
the
I
first
like
time
about the
I
result
met
of this
you
is that
was,
it's singular, it's a whole. It's not,
studying the
it's
James
not
Liddy Brand and Jim
chronological, it's
Chapson.
kind
I
of
went
mixed
to
up.
a
It
party
shows a
at
lot
their
of connective
house.
tissue
Yeah, it was like for a
between
Blue Canary.
work
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
some of you guys are
And,
familiar with in terms of my output,
Was I
some of you are not.
obnoxious?
So
Was I
it
loud?
kind of
No,
links these
I
things.
just remember standing outside.
I always see it as whole,
and
as
there's a
singular,
group of
but
people around, and I was outside on
how
the porch with, I
it
think,
goes
you
out
and
into the
several
world. I
others,
see it in my
and James is
studio, I
inside
see it in my
the
life.
kitchen.
But as it goes out
And
into
the first thing
exhibition,
I
whether
think
it's the
maybe
Green
he ever said to
Gallery
me
or another
was,
exhibition space,
this group
you know,
of
it's
poets
eclipsed.
assembled in a
It has
circle.
this, you know,
He
it's
said,
bracketed in a way. So I think this was,
I
you know,
want you to look
John
at
approaching
look
it
at all these people,
in
and
terms
by
of
looking
thinking
at them,
about
tell me which one's the best
laying
poet.
out, you know, 20 plus years of work this way is great.
who
And
did you
I just want to say
answer?
one more thing about including a student work, which I'm so glad that I just
Did you
made
point
a
to Zach?
massive list of my former students, and John got to be the selector because that I couldn't bear to do that.
So-
Faculty less
you
so. I
work
mean,
at-
faculty,
work at
these are
Woodland
important
Path.
I do.
people in how I
You-
think
you-
about
you take care of the books.
my own education and
And
where I
you're
am now in the
inventorying
studio
them right
practice.
now.
But
How is
you know,
that
it's not
going?
new because
mostly
when Ed
done.
Paschke
You're
had
mostly
a
done?
large
Okay.
survey
I thought about
exhibition
coming- I
at the
thought
Art
about
Institute
coming by and
now many
working
years
there
ago. There
today,
was
but I
a show
figured I'd just go home
hosted
and
by
eat-
the School of
eat
the Art
tacos
Institute called Paschke Picks.
instead.
And Ed
Yeah.
basically selected
Yeah.
'Cause I don't
some
have
students
any
who worked
money.
under him. So I was riffing off of
But,
an idea
did you
that
meet
Ed
Jim
had, or
Chapson?
the
I
School of
had
the Art
a
Institute had in
class
conjunction with the
him,
Art
a
Institute.
creative writing class.
I wonder if you could comment
And,
on that
he-
selection
233?
process of the
Sure. I don't know.
younger artists. It's just, I'm curious because there's certain, you know, we talked
You ever
about
made love
this the other
outdoors?
day, that there's
Yeah.
some
Where?
little
Where?
dynamics that have developed
What's the difference?
in that
Outdoors
room,
is
and
Right.
the way that works are placed,
Was it
and
in
I
like, was
wondered
it
if
in
there
like
was
Eastern
something.
Europe?
Yeah.
Or was it
Well, let me
That's
back
how
up a
you know
second
it.
because I think a lot of Michelle. I can say something. I can try to say something
Central
that Michelle
North America.
Central
probably won't
America?
say is because she's usually a lot of her. I think her
Like,
work is
was it
kind
in
of
Kansas?
understated
Was
in
it
this
while
way,
we
where it's like
visited?
It was
there's
not
more
close to
information in the work
Kansas,
than
no.
what Michelle
Although I
will
was
actually,
just
I think,
thinking about
let
our
on.
visit to
And
Kansas when
I think
we
that
used unctuous bullying,
in
that just
all
stuck
these
with
different
me.
series she's doing, she
I
talks about
remember,
indexing a lot and
reading
this
in Lawrence
accumulation
when- I can't
of
remember what I
marks
said.
as this
I had
kind
read
of passage of
something silly,
time, this
and
passage
then,
of kind
Jim
of
McCrary afterwards quoted
couched
back, like, some
in
random
these
line to
kind of the
me,
history of the
I couldn't tell if he
domestic,
was
of
making
kind
fun
of
of me or
everyday
not.
passage
Still
of
don't know.
time.
From
And
the- from
I
the,
think that she's weaving a lot of
Victoria's
layers
Secret,
of
No, I think
between
that was
ideas
this
of
was
like
another
formal
stupid thing
decisions,
where,
really kind of
the translation of the
hardcore like
Maximus poems, the
painting
Oh.
ideas
cell phone.
with
That was
like
quite a- that was
family
quite a-
family identity and
Why would you say that?
and that we don't see that in,
I thought it
in
was kind of
we don't
brilliant.
always get to see that in
Just
singular
kept trying.
paintings.
I mean, it would have been a lot
but,
of work.
I think that-
Explain to us what you did.
So yeah, so by putting it all together, it's kind of like I didn't actually know what I was
how's your
going
audience?
to
First of all,
see or
it's
what
a
we were going to
beautiful night
see,
here in Milwaukee,
but it's kind of like, and
73
maybe
last I
Michelle,
checked,
you probably haven't had actually the chance to
and
look
why
at
are you
everything
telling
at-
our audience
in
it's a
one
beautiful night?
iPhone.
I'm going to be,
So,
be generous and say it's a persistent
so
mist,
it's like, maybe
it seems
so-
to
it's-
have
it's
stopped, but,
like-
it's a lovely phrase.
It's revealing
persistent mist.
something, and I think
walking
using the whole exhibition as an experiment to reveal
going on.
something of self-reflection to look forward, not only for the artist but for kind of a community to
it
like,
was a gorgeous
you know,
night.
who maybe seen little
You know, we
little
could really
small
use 8
sections of
hours
this.
of steady
I mean, that's
gentle rain,
one of
but a nice persistent mist.
the functions of a survey, but we wanted to do this
steady gentle
literally
rain all day.
in a meta survey within a survey, and then so that I think kind of addresses like, or this is kind of addressing some of
But
how ideas are
don't you wanna talk
manifested
about the
through the
Charles
studio
Olson?
practice.
Yes, so I-
And then
Is that what it was
when we
called?
step back,
It was
I mean, I always
called,
like when I see one of Michelle's
I don't remember
paintings
what it
with
was
like
called.
this index of mark
But,
making, I start thinking about each painting as one mark,
How did you do
and the entire career as
I
an index
took
of
the
mark
book,
making. So it's just like
Maximus
zooming
poems
out, and
by
then if we
Charles
zoom out
Olson,
even further, I think
and started to type them
Michelle and
into
I are
my
both
cell
interested
phone
in
and chose
influence and
the
authorship
auto-correcting
in art, and
words.
I don't.
Um,
It's harder to see it actually. I don't
think I
know if it's
abandoned
actually
that project when I ruined
specifically
my
dealt
phone,
with within
answering
your
it while
studio
doing the
practice,
dishes, and
but
therefore lost
within
that
the way
to
that
the
you kind of
autocorrecting,
navigate and
yeah.
behave in as a
Yeah.
as an educator, as a
I can
curator,
relate,
as
but
a
I did
programmer,
tell you
and
how
a
I
support and a
lost my last
platformer
cell phone.
of
Yes,
innovating
yeah,
through
in
the
the
suburban and
urinal,
the poor
and
farm, innovating
it
these
happened to me
models of
at,
showing art,
Ty Joe's many
but
years ago.
actually
Yeah.
critiquing them at the same
And it
time
was- were you able to
simultaneously.
save it? It's
I was
done when you-
not.
There's where
I,
we have a lot of
I
overlap,
reacted poorly
and
to dropping in the urinal, and I picked it up with
so
paper towels.
I think
and put it in the sink.
I think we were interested
So far,
in
I
kind
ran
of
hot water.
somehow locating this larger
So
behavior
you
that's
thought-
kind of beyond the
Not
studio
sure
and
about
looking
the
at
germs
these
and
other
the
actions that
water
Michelle
damage.
does, in my mind, as
So you washed it thoroughly.
contributions to artistic value and
Yes.
art and kind of changing what art
Yeah,
can be actually.
Jim
So
McCrary, he was-
that's
he
where the
was a nice
student
guy,
and the
but
teacher work came in.
kinda
Is that
Dorito,
and
Sounds
by
like-
dialoguing with, I mean, a lot of these artists I knew, a lot of them I didn't know, so
Yeah,
it was
the
just
extent
a
of the
process of
refreshments that
trying to
evening.
see
Nacho
connections
cheese
of
Doritos.
Michelle's
Yeah.
influence in
We didn't get
conceptual
paid for
ways
that
and
either.
formal ways and geographic
No, we didn't.
ways. And
This is gonna turn into a
but through the
total
dialogues that I got to have with
This
these
episode
artists,
of Hauser,
I
this
got
is
to actually learn a
bitch
lot
episode.
more
Let's do
about
it. That's what I'm
some
here
of the new ideas of
What do you want to bitch about Milwaukee? What's the
boy.
thing that annoys you
God.
most?
concrete abstraction,
I mean,
or
just
some of
start
these.
with the
There's a
first
lot
thing.
of conversations where
That
through
you
the
come up
eyes of the
saying
students, I was
on
able
the-
to
on
see
the
things
streaming
that I didn't get to see
stream.
previously in Michelle's work, or I hadn't. They were there, but I just hadn't really had the language to identify them. So I think that.
Traffic.
Traffic.
I hope that
We need more
just
traffic.
seeing these things,
There's
even
not
if they
enough
don't have the stories
traffic.
behind all the artists, it'll help put a
in a
different
way,
perspective on
that
where
does
where Michelle's work is located,
mean
and
in the
also
cultural
it's kind of like
sense?
full disclosure. It's like
of,
who
of cultural
influenced
traffic.
Michelle, so it's not like
Milwaukee?
if you see elements of these
Yes.
other artists' work. I mean, obviously they're part of a
more
longer dialogue, and I
artists.
think that you
More
especially have
bands.
this.
No,
I mean, you have
no,
a very
more
specific,
films, more
or you're
films.
very
I mean,
critical, and you have
there's
an
nothing
edit,
bad, just
but
there's enough
somehow
of that.
simultaneously
Other
you
people
have
don't spend money
this
on
like
stuff.
flow. You have this flux that like kind of runs through you, and it's
You're
like
saying
and
Milwaukeeans are
it's
tight
just sort of
ones.
identifying
Yes.
where you're at right now is kind of a part of a longer
Cheap.
historical trajectory. I think is like some of the magic of
So we
what,
did this reading
how we
series
how we
together.
constantly define value in contemporary
That was,
art
it was
climate.
called
So
Salacious Banter.
Well, yeah, and
Yes,
I was
it
telling Sarah and John when
It
we were
was-
walking
it was fun.
through
It's great
the
fun.
former student gallery.
Our first reading
that
that we
it's-
did was
and even looking at
Kevin
the
Thurston
former
and Gina Meyer. It
professor
was.
and mentor work, that,
That was a lot
how
of fun.
interesting it
Yeah,
is in
talk a little bit
terms
about
of
that.
if we were set up at
Well,
the Academy in Munich. All of that work in that
mean, I
room
could have
would
done
look like
more to
Michelle
help
Brauner
out
paintings.
with,
I mean, that's what
with-
it's that
with,
kind
you
of
know,
structure there.
the
The
food
Academy
and
is you work with the
preparing.
master,
Visually, yeah.
and then you
There was one
because
time
you're
when
dealing
Dustin
with the
Williamson
same
read
kind of
with
visual
Arshini
vocabulary, the
and
same
Opal,
kind of
and you
conceptual
handed me
frame.
a broom.
So it speaks to how very different
And I refused to help
education
sweep
is
up, which
in
in
the visual
hindsight was
arts
really kind of
in the United
unreasonable, like
States.
I should help
Where we're about
clean up.
discourse,
I don't remember
dialogue,
that.
we talk.
I do-
It's the
what
good
I
conversation, the
remember was
ideas.
when,
It may,
Lewis
ring
Warsh
out
was
to
reading,
be, everything from
and,
a kind of gestural kind of painting to a
asked
much
you to
more
help me make
conceptual
the spaghetti.
program.
And you said,
But it really is about this
"Lewis Warsh is here,
exchange
you
that
want me to
goes
make
on, this kind
noodles?"
of one-on-one in the studio. So that's really quite fascinating. And also,
I was kind of bitchy.
the inclusion
this
of
is-
Tom
this hasn't
Utek,
gone the way I
who
wanted
is
it to.
I was kind of a
an
diva.
undergrad
Well, me
professor
too.
of mine.
You mean your
I
appearance
was
here
telling,
hasn't
I
gone
think
the
Sarah
way-
Yes, it's
specifically that,
conciliatory rather than,
coming from northern
argumentative.
Wisconsin, and that's the
Well, I
vernacular
mean,
that,
there's some
that
banter.
I understood.
Which was the
And to
basis
have to
of-
like push away from that.
watch
So it
Breaking
may,
Bad
and I
last
actually do
Sunday?
enjoy looking
No,
at the
I've
work, but
I've
it's really
downloaded it
important
legally,
to
iTunes,
sometimes to
299
have these
HD,
things that you
but I
push
haven't,
against, to be able
watched
to
it yet.
define yourself
It's
in a
good.
different location.
Yeah.
So there,
There's an
those
interview,
people, those kind of
who's
practices
the guy
are
that
as
plays
important, if not
Walter
more
White?
important than
Bryan Cranston.
something that's
Brian Cranston.
that you all buy into in terms of
There's an interview
kind of
where
vocabulary.
he's talking about
Another
the
point of
first
interest in
episode,
that room
and he
before we
says,
get
oh,
back
well,
to
nothing really
your
happens
own
in the
work
first
more
episode.
specifically
It's
is
kind of more about
the
atmosphere
artists,
or
both
something.
influences
And,
and influenced,
But it was
are
actually
coming from.
kind of,
They're actually in a huge range of
I don't care for his
art worlds that they're
interviews.
navigating, and some of them are coming from Kansas or Florida.
Yeah, it
some
was
of them
kind
are
of,
coming from
he's too-
New York and LA
seemed like he was
and
kind of
Chicago,
phoning it in. Of
and
course,
some
it
of
might
them
have been
work
over
in
the phone.
commercial markets. Some of them work in academic areas. Some of them
was a bit
work
goofy
in
or,
just their
hyper.
own
Yeah.
isolated community. I think that
Well, I
that
mean,
might speak to
that
some
was
of the
kind of his
different
stock,
layers of value that
character
maybe
on Malcolm
you see
in the
that
Middle.
Of course, yeah.
end up
He's a very
empowering these
goofy,
artists to continue their
hyperactive
practice in
Do you
all
know that,
different types
Malcolm-
of scenarios.
Malcolm in the
And I think
Middle.
also
Frankie Muniz.
Yes,
some of
he's
the
a big
layers
fan
of,
Summerfest.
of value that you're
Really?
hitting in your
Just here
work.
hanging out,
And again, something
watching
that
bands
is
at
like
Summerfest.
has a certain critical
Where does
value,
he
a certain
live? He
commercial
just
value,
travels
but then
here?
also a certain personal
Probably-
value and like some sort
Wow.
of
He seems Canadian to me.
mundane
I don't
like
know if that's accurate or not.
acknowledgement of like how
You didn't go to
these are
Summerfest
just
this
these
year, did you?
No,
things.
sadly
So
not.
it's so there's these
You have any
these-
music festival
the
memories
actual
you wanna
objects that
share
you
with us?
create have this certain grace to
ever,
them
like,
that kind of
been
Yeah.
ghost
hit on a
or
lot of
I
different points.
saw-
Big E?
I saw
Over the last week, I've been
R. Kelly at
thinking about
Summerfest
your
many years
work,
ago.
Michelle, in terms of
Yeah, I can't remember who
thinking of
else was
word
on the bill, but
enthusiasm or the
R.
enthusiast,
Kelly
and the curator and art historian Johanna Burton has
Maybe
written
LL
about
Cool J.
in
I can't remember.
adopting
What are your
the
memories
role
of
of
the
an enthusiast
of the show? Art
in
He
your
exposed
artistic
himself.
practice can
Really?
be
That's my memory of it.
kind
Yeah.
of political or
genitals?
critical standpoint, and
Oh my
you know,
God.
embracing this kind of
The main genital.
drive and emotion,
You mean his
and you use the
penis?
word master in describing
Oh, yeah.
another model of teaching, but you know, taking that, you know, not
can
to
say penis.
suggest
Oh, okay. I didn't know the rules.
anything negative, but the
You
role
say it
of
as much
the
as you
amateur,
want.
someone who just
Sorry, I don't get
makes
the
and-
channel. I don't get the
and
station in my
has an
neighborhood, so I
abundance.
don't know the
And I
rules.
think
I don't
in
get
the
to
show we really see an abundance
Yeah.
of your
Tune
work,
in.
Well,
and
as I'm
an
sure you know, you don't
inclusivity
really
that
tune
also
in.
refutes the
You
sense of
kinda,
hierarchy.
it's more like you
and
log on. You log on,
I
tune in,
just
drop
wonder
out.
if you relate to
It's a countercultural
that way
experience.
of making as, you know, adopting some kind of political or critical
you started
strategy,
working at
or is it
Woodland
really
Pattern
just
when?
the way that
5 years
you
ago.
must work as an artist?
Yeah, you know, I
What was
think
the
it's
interview
both.
process
You know,
like?
there's a certain
I
obsessive
got
compulsive
told him I read
nature that I
Sullivan's
have
blog
that I
and I
shouldn't
was there.
fight, and I don't.
Yeah?
I embrace it.
You
But there's
said-
also
My
a
friend
recognition
asked
of
I read
Mark
Silliman's blog,
who's
and you said,
ask
when
quality
reading
of
Silliman's
what one
blog
does with
passed
their
for being
time.
a poetry
The idea
expert.
that one
Yeah.
has a freedom
You said, "I read
within our
Silliman's blog,"
society
and they said,
to
"You're
be able to
hired."
dedicate
Yeah.
oneself to the making of something, whether it's the repetitive,
Was
endless
the- how did Ron-
Well, we have-
points on a
have-
condo
we have at,
or
Woodland
stitchery,
Pattern about
that is actually a political
any given
act.
time
So
about
I
5
do
customers.
understand that, and that's kind of the
3 of
broad-based
whom are interested in working there.
nature of
None
how
of whom are
one
qualified.
can
I happened at
fold
that
in
time
the
to
idea of
be
politics. I
one
love the
of
idea of
3
the
of the 5
enthusiast,
that fit
which
that-
I think I think is
But
right.
that
And I'm
doesn't-
going to
that
look
doesn't-
at
well,
Joanna's,
I guess I would be
research
interested in working
into her
there, so
theory
that
into
does
the
cover
enthusiast
what I
and
was
its
gonna
relationship
say.
to the political. But
What about the people that
you know, it
just come
has
there and
there
hang
is a
out?
degree of platforming in which one is kind of
about-
selfless,
what
puts
about you?
forward others, but then
just
there
kind of a
is
fixture.
a kind of selfishness
kind
to
of
it too, because one comes to
I
understand.
like to think of myself as Woodland Patterns Fonzie.
And particularly in
Woodland
this
Patterns
exhibition,
Norm.
again, working with John,
Kind of a wild
the
card
unconventional
character in the
curator,
sitcom
right?
that is
That,
Woodland
you know, I am learning a lot about my own work in the process, in this last
Kramer?
week, in terms of how
Yeah,
we hung it.
I
I
have
mean,
the hair.
it was very unconventional
Oh,
by
yeah, I
the
never
fact
noticed
that
I
poor
was
Bruce, he
thinking
came
of the way
to
you
the
opened
studio and I gave him everything. Not a
think
selected
you could
number
do that
of
kind
works
of-
that
the
have
door's too
been,
heavy
you know,
for you.
carefully itemized and so forth, and
Plus there's
you know,
carpet, you
wrought
can't
within the
slide
last 2 years of conversation. Everything went, and we were able to kind of piece together from that, to use
Yeah.
that body, that corpse, that the kind of corpse of work
Tell me a
to
story
pull
about,
something together. And I learned a lot about
What was the
my own
single
work,
most
work from the past, other exhibitions that I had. I learned a lot about exhibition
experience you've
display, the
ever
idea
had
of what a survey show is.
at
So
Woodland
there's always
Pattern?
something, you know, the idea of more
With a
into being
customer.
inclusive. There's this other cutting,
yes.
it's not undercutting, it's
You
the
don't
flip
have to
side of
name
that, and that is one
names, so,
learns
you know,
from that.
obviously
One is
we've been
able to
refraining from
actually
naming all
be
names.
relatively selfish and make it into a project, make it into the process. So I think that, you know, maybe the enthusiast has both of those components. They're, you know, it's supportive, inclusive, but also
This is really great.
being
This is
able
like
to
Mark
glean
Maron.
something from that, an
my style.
understanding
Yeah.
That's who I
of their
learned
own
from.
work
It's
and
good.
others. And, you know, I don't think I would do anything if that didn't happen. I mean, that's where the Suburban comes from, the Poor Farm, all these
You
other
don't really have
projects,
any
critical writing.
awkward,
I'm always
because
learning,
of
and I think
customers.
that's
More-
an
it's
example
more
of
the
that.
uncustomer that is
But yes, Sarah, what was the,
people
was,
that come
what
in
was
to
the
hang
follow-up,
out.
something about
not to
the-
hang out, but
Oh, if you,
our
yeah, I think you answered it. It was
Browsing.
Is this
no,
really just the way that you
our
have to
well,
work?
you know,
That's your, that
what I
you-
would like to use this opportunity
So
to
the
Or if it's a
enthusiasm
political-
comes from
do,
this
Michael, is to
desire to learn and experiment, and
just remind people
it seems like that's also where
hoping to sell books.
why
if you
your
want to sell a book, someone
practice
has
is
a book.
highly conducive to
And,
collaboration and
introducing
community
things
is
like
because
that,
it's
just
like
take that into
it seems like
account.
it's reaching out different perspectives, and even
Well,
you know having
I
this
wouldn't
programming
necessarily
of
expect
another
anyone
one of
to
your
buy
you know
what I
suburban
was
galleries upstairs
selling
included
a
in your
book.
show to kind
That's not true at all.
of that was like you know
There would be
an idea that
5
Bruce
people
kind
that would buy
of
it.
suggested, and that was quickly
That's
embraced by
bestseller.
so
That is bestseller level of
by
women
us as
pattern.
your identity as
Top
a
10, top
artist.
10.
It's like
But I also
50
think it's
Shades of
important to
Grey.
note that, I may be
Yeah.
enthusiastic to all kinds of
Would it be
painting, all
worth
kinds
it
of
for you guys
discourse,
to
all kinds of
stock
artist practice.
bestsellers? Would that bring
Again,
in some
learning
cash?
something from that, maybe pushing at it, maybe being
Um,
critical.
Like people
But
around the
that doesn't all
neighborhood,
come
like
through the
someone who
studio
lives
doors.
on
There is a
Bradley
very
Street
kind
wants
of
to read 50 Shades of
refined
Grey.
vocabulary that
We'll
I
order it.
engage
We'll order it
in,
for you.
whether
We'll do
it's
that, sure.
mostly based in
Okay.
a kind of repetition, a kind of mark making.
Well-
The mundane, almost the cliche mark is something that
It's 10:36.
makes its way
Oh,
into
boy,
the
we have a
studio.
lot of time to
So
kill,
there
don't
is
we?
that,
Yeah.
there is
All
that
right,
kind of
let me step
separation.
up my
But
game. I'm sorry,
one,
I
I could not
apologize.
only do, I
Had some things
I
written
could not
down.
only do that. I have to have these other, again, it's the field that
Do
I'm
you
in.
wear
the need to
cologne? I've
know
always
the
wanted
people that
to
are
know.
around me.
No.
Yep.
Oh, because you always smell really good.
So what might be some of the things you
It's always
learned
like
about your
kinda-
own work
Kind of like
in the process
masculine.
of this, making
musk,
this show?
but not
or
like
is it still
pheromone. I don't know.
fresh
Sometimes
and
it's like
being
must be Old
formulated?
Spice.
Oh,
or
that's
something.
kind. Give me a potential out. Yes, it's being formulated as I speak. I learned a lot about exhibition practice. I learned about Wednesday during this week that I was losing my mind because I wasn't able to make anything. Like it was only about display and exhibition, and that was I kind of hit a point there where I just didn't want to see all these lovely, helpful people anymore, and I just wanted to be in my studio. So that's
This is the low light of the house
so
radio
you start to
program, isn't it,
understand
so far?
how much you
I
can
think
deal
a lot
with
of
it,
people
and
are
also
really
the public
interested in
face of
knowing
this.
why
This is a
you
public
smell so
exhibition, again, the balancing of the public and the private, and
fragrance
the
helps.
private kind of private making too.
Organic
So
fragrance helps.
to keep those things in
Yeah.
proportion is really
So Silliman's
important.
blog, should we bring it
but
back?
having to go to
Someone
Marathon of
needs
this
to.
week
You think we
with
should have
again
start our
all
own
kinds of
Silliman's
amazing
blog?
people,
Silliman's blog is
supportive
dead.
people in helping
So
craft this
someone needs to
exhibition.
bring it back.
You
I
know,
think it
knowing
still
that I could not
exists
hang
as
this wall,
an
that
internet-
I
I
thought
basically,
Matt died the
all the
other
work
day
was
because I
here,
saw
and,
his
I have my favorites, and what I would have done is put front and center things. It would have taken me a year to
have the
actually be able
black
to be
bars
happy with
around
this
it?
puzzle of over 100 pieces, that
When
I had to
someone dies,
relegate
he
that
puts the black
to somebody
bars
else.
around it.
Here's the
think it
work,
was
you put it
cigarette
together,
smoke.
you
There's like
hang
a
it,
haze
it'll
that
be
I couldn't
fine,
tell.
within these parameters, that's what needs to happen.
haze
What's that about?
So you
What's that
learn
about? Do you know
those
what that's
kinds of
about? I
things.
saw
So
all the links, but I haven't
I
read
learned a
them.
lot about myself.
About him
I'm
and
still learning about
Marjorie Perloff and,
what the kind of understanding of the
Oh,
work. I think some of the early car
he,
work, which I haven't seen before,
wanna
some of those old
responded to something.
film,
I don't think I'll be able
Super
to
8,
bring it up quick enough, but he responded to
films,
something
digging those out. They were
that
interesting
Marjorie
to kind of look at.
Perloff
And,
wrote about conceptual writing.
On a real kind of
And,
immediate level.
kind
Man,
of
we were young
critiquing
once. I
what
mean,
she
how
said
young we
about
look from
conceptual
20
writing.
years ago,
He was kind of trying to
also
say
kind of
that
quite
it's more
almost
about,
a mawkish nostalgia for being back
effect
in
and
Milwaukee
kind
when
of
these things were
that,
made. And again, that's something that I
not
started out the
inertness,
conversation with,
but-
but a kind of
and then-
thinking
and then
about
she responded to
what
him,
that
and it was
landscape
in
was
the,
way back
LA
then and how
review
it has
of,
really
books.
changed and how one cannot make those works anymore.
Yeah, I can't really.
It's
I
an
actually
impossibility,
just
and
kinda
it's
skimmed it.
speaking to the point.
That's
This may not be
kinda- do you
terribly
find
interesting,
that
but Seal, my daughter, who I think is
you-
eating a
you
brownie
skim
out there
more
and
now?
afraid to come in.
As-
She's
as
7.
more years gone by
I was
where you've
surprised and
had a
relatively
regular
young, and
internet,
there's no.
I
We
find
made a
that
lot
it's
of work
really
about
done
the
that to
boys
me.
when they were young,
Yeah.
and it's not, and that was early 90s.
Unfortunately, the level of
and,
discourse in the
she
internet
made a
has been
comment
raised
about where
significantly
am
to,
I in all of
well
this,
thought out,
right?
reasons.
She's here.
Yeah, she's
gets to
here.
be here.
She's here, and
fighting
and I'm sure she
Flame
wouldn't
wars.
want
Dog fights and stuff like
have
that. I had a lot more
her
attention
diaper
back
change on
then.
camera, but but it's interesting how that wouldn't occur to
Yeah.
me to fold her in. I mean, within the kind of arc of my practice or my collaboration with
That's that
Brad,
checked.
we're making formal hanging objects now. That's the collaborative
you-
practice.
you-
We're not dealing with the
Besides
kids.
the-
So
the
that I
trap.
think is that's where I'm
Okay.
really kind of wrestling
Constructive
around in
criticism.
terms of how,
Oh,
why,
great.
when,
Perfect.
and that's really
Constructive
interesting. So
criticism.
we'll see. You know.
We need more parks. We need to fund the park system.
You mentioned also at the studio practice
need,
and a sense of, and with this exhibition, balancing the private and the public, and
The sad
when
state of
you
affairs here in grand old Milwaukee.
Yeah.
I
bring
think it is.
the domestic, the private
I don't
sphere
know.
into your work.
I don't know what to do.
There's nothing we can do.
I wonder if
think-
you
I
could
think
just
there
talk a
needs
little
to
bit
be-
about that
to be more
iconography and
bratwurst.
Sure.
the impulse, finding
think
those
prostitution
abstract
needs to be
marks and
legalized.
the mark making that goes into the patterns
And
of a
unionized.
rug or
Yeah.
and
I don't know
so
what
on.
There needs to be a strong union.
No, that's really fair.
Yeah, there has to
Yesterday,
be
Bill
accompanied
Conger,
by a strong
who
union.
was one of my professors at Northwestern,
there
came
has
up
to
and
be strong
Here we
labor
go.
movement.
we were kind of talking about that. He was kind of
This is
longing
just
to
what
see
the
some
show
work
needed.
that I did at Northwestern, and there
Yeah,
wasn't
well, I don't
anything
think
there.
he's
And,
gonna
and that's because the
come
work
over
that I
here.
did at school wasn't,
What did he say?
you know, it happened,
Well,
you know,
had
a
a
year or
great,
two out of
talk.
school where we moved back up to Milwaukee. And what I was
should
doing
fill
at
in the,
Northwestern
listening
was
audience,
looking at images of
Okay.
females in
What was the
popular
story of
culture.
how
It
he
was
got
really
kicked out of
political. I was coming out of art history, working with 20th century studies at the time
funny
here
story,
at
that
was
UWM.
funny, but,
Pat Mellencamp, who was a
someone,
feminist film professor. So
wrote-
my work was
Sharpton
illustrating
wrote
that
Sex on the
kind
Carpet.
of, and you know, that
and
was
then
about the
not
academy. That was
doing it,
about
and then
being
have
in the
Blue Sharpie
academy.
over there
And
facing hands.
Julia Fish is included
all
in
over
my
his
group
face?
of mentors. She
wow.
wasn't she teaches at University of Illinois at Chicago, where I
Well,
did not
that's-
attend,
that's
but
kind
she
of,
was an important visiting artist at
is that why you
Northwestern,
put
where
the
she came in
chalkboard
and
up
looked
in the
at one of
bathroom?
these, you know, very kind of political image of
People to
Mary
write
Tyler
on it,
Moore as a
like,
subservient female, and she just looked at the background and there was a little pattern back
see
there. She said,
yourself
"That's all that
running a
needs to be.
bookstore
It just
yourself?
needs to be
I do
this
run a
little
bookstore.
pattern of work."
I mean,
I'm the
And you know,
bookstore
at the
manager.
time, I'm like, "Well, we just are not
Owning-
understanding
No,
each other
no,
here, and you know, I'm a political artist, and you
Like a
can
rare
leave
book
now."
you
And within a matter of 2 years,
Aren't you
that's
kinda
what I was
building
doing.
your
And
stock
Not really.
you know,
I
and
mean,
I
no
will
one's
always
buying
remember
anything.
that
That's the
studio visit.
problem. Actually, that's what I would like
And
to
2
talk
years
about,
later,
Michael.
Okay.
we had a
Is,
little house in River
Tightwads.
West.
No,
And I had
I
2
want-
small
no, I
kids,
wanna
and I
talk
was
about
looking
this,
at the
the,
backdrop to my
poetry
middle-class
economy.
domestic existence and recreating
And-
that. So
and
the
how-
political
and,
stuff when I was at the academy, when I was in school,
How
you know, had to go away. I learned something, but that was really a condition
in
of that
terms of,
context. So
those
that's
small
where that kind of repetition came
there are a
from.
lot
It's
of
about the
flies in
backdrop.
here.
It's about
Sorry
you know
about
the thing that supports all this other stuff, this other social
I wanna
stuff.
talk
You know,
about
whether it's family, whether
how
it's
poetry
teaching,
functions in the
whether it's
absence
running
of
an
the market.
exhibition space. So that's where
Okay.
the backdrop, the repetitive element
Well,
comes in.
I don't know. When it
In
comes
terms
to
of the
rare
family
books, it
work,
always seems to me
Brad
like
and
when
I,
they-
as you
when
guys
they-
are
when they
gleaning,
jack up the
as soon as
price
we both left grad school, he was at
on
UIC, I was
a
at
rare book,
Northwestern.
it's
We
based
came
on,
immediately
like,
to Milwaukee.
literally
And,
five
you know,
men in
again, you know, Milwaukee is
America, or
always
maybe
a project in the making.
the
And
world
so
who
we
would be
ended
willing
up,
to pay that much for them.
you know, lamenting not seeing our
Like-
colleagues.
Yeah.
Brad was at school with Arturo
I'll
Herrera,
look at
Tom
books,
Friedman. It was a
like
great
these
group
rare
of
books
artists who were
online,
coming out
and
of UIC at the
one-
time.
one copy for sale for
So we started
$12.
collaborating.
And I
You know,
think to myself,
and mind
if I
you, the
buy that,
90s,
does that mean
decade
it's
of Rirka Tirvanish,
worthless,
we
or that
actually,
it's
in our little
very
apartment
valuable? There's
here in River
none for
West,
sale. Can I buy the last
hosted a
one for
dinner for
sale?
Felix Gonzalez Torres, who
Oh.
was
What
doing
does
his
that
first
mean?
museum show at the Milwaukee Art Museum at the time.
don't know,
And
don't
I will
they, like-
remember him reading stories to Peter, my who was 3 at the time, and we became
there
fast
is.
friends. So
I don't know
Milwaukee
how
can
they
make those things
determine.
happen. It's
But
a
I mean,
funny thing how the international world can come here. So doing all this work about, you know,
Well,
the family, this kind of
I don't know.
collaboration,
This
the idea of
question is just
giveaways,
gonna have to go
you know,
unanswered.
that's
It
kind
is.
of how we were set up
I
in
wanna
the 80s. A
apologize
lot of
to those
identity
listeners
construction,
who
right? I mean,
may
we all
not
have our
know.
kind of stereotype of what that 10 years was. So
Oh, don't be
that's where that
hard on
work comes from. And like I said, we've moved. We're in a different context
So,
now. But that
Woodland
that
Pattern,
provided
yeah.
us to work together
Democracy
when
or
we felt
dictatorship?
removed from our colleagues we left behind in Chicago, and to actually ask the
do have
questions,
the power to
particularly
ban
with the
people
kids.
from the
We
store.
were a
I
very
don't
young
know.
young
You don't?
family
No.
at the time, and
I
you know, a lot of
wish I
that
did.
work,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
particularly
You
the
know I
Sylvia
don't, 'cause you
Poggioli
still
piece,
come
which Bruce
Yeah.
probably had the wherewithal to
regularly.
turn down, where Brad is just
But
saying
someone
Sylvia
told me, like, I
Poggioli,
think
Sylvia
Rob told me,
Poggioli,
like,
and
oh,
the
he does
idea
have
of
that power.
you know, raising our kids to
don't-
listen to
you just
NPR
use
and
it
to be
for
good
it.
liberals and to, you know, if they
Tried
can
to ban
roll
one
that off
person,
of their
they
tongue,
haven't
and,
come back,
and they were
because
also
that's
learning language at the time. So, so it was really about asking those kind of
someone I know?
questions. You know, how are we doing as parents, and so forth. Yeah.
Oh, I should say on something
Yeah.
on something earlier, Michelle did get her art making fix while we were installing the show. She was working on it,
I did.
How do you feel about
blowing
River
off steam
West?
on a little silver point in the corner every now and again.
Had to break down.
But to that, Matt, in that
were
in
you-
that
were you at the
same
bookstore
topic,
during the
if the show does, if the
I was.
installation does look good, it's because
Did you walk over
like
and look at it?
obviously Bruce is a
No.
professional installer, but
No.
Michelle,
You probably see it
you know, an
though
artist
from
who's
the store.
not
I saw
supposed to be necessarily that good at
some smoke and
installing,
stuff. We didn't have any
is
electricity
like
that day, so we had to
terribly
make sure it wasn't
competent
Spider-Man, but,
in the gallery. And
Oh,
just,
really?
I mean, she was like moving around
Oh.
so
That's-
quickly.
yeah, that's,
and
How
I
is
think
it?
that like I think probably because of your experience of installing hundreds of
Spider-Man?
shows
Yeah.
at the Suburban and
Yeah.
curating shows,
Are you
all
gonna
over the
see
world
Batman?
that you have a certain
Emma Stone's great.
it-
She's 30.
there's a grace
She's great.
in
She's
that
playing a
as
high
well
school
of just
kid.
kind of
She's
getting
30,
so,
but
kind of making it
she's
happen
30,
without
but she's great.
without forcing
Yeah, I mean, she's
anything,
playing
and
a 15-year-old.
an incredible amount of
really?
competence.
So.
And install and also in panel
Wow,
discussions
that's
too,
kind
I should say.
Well, but
Are
by
you
the
gonna
fact
go to
that
see
you're the
the
unconventional
Batman
artist
Rises?
curator, I
Yeah,
mean, I'm
there we
all
go.
for artist curators. And
I
know
don't
you're-
think I'm gonna. No.
And I've been known, in
I
press
don't really
to
care.
undercut curators.
It's Batman
because
versus
they
the
can often
99%.
Just toe the party line. I mean,
That's
in
what I've
terms
read.
of, what one would think
Yeah.
about a mid-career
Yeah, and
exhibition. We talked
finally
about
we're on
that.
Batman's side, right?
Well,
Yeah, so, but you gave me, I guess what I'm saying,
I guess
John, is that
as
you
loyal
gave
Hollywood
me,
moviegoers,
a certain
we're meant
amount
to
of
root
latitude
against the
to be able to
99%.
collaborate and to move around. And that was important. And I don't always feel that. I mean, I've worked in
This
other
is a Republican
scenarios
conspiracy
where,
that Batman is a
the
Republican
curator, somebody comes to the
Who
studio
are-
and
who are
says this, this, and this,
represented,
and then I'm
ironically,
hands off,
by
and it
someone
goes. And
named
I'm fine with
Bane.
that. That's a reality of how our world
much for me.
circulates objects.
Yeah.
But I
But
don't learn
it's
as much as
ironic
when I'm
because
here
Mitt
piecing
Romney
something
worked
like
for
this
Bain
together.
Capital.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for me, the structure of the
believe
exhibition
He
was,
a big
it was,
Yeah,
it was
he
again to
was Bain
showcase
Cat. He
all
was
these
pretty
different,
much the
all these different behaviors that kind of encompass
he
your
was Bane.
identity as an artist.
was like that
That's why there's
Batman
or
character.
your galleries upstairs showing other people's work, your students,
Yeah.
your professors,
The hell is
your
that
old
thing?
work,
I don't know,
and
it's just a
then
picture,
some of
I'm
my
not quite
favorite
sure.
stuff,
Uh-huh.
which is
My understanding
totally
is that
enriched
mostly
by
he's in the movie, not Batman, but I don't know how he's
last
supposed to
20
talk
years
with that thing
of
on his mouth.
stuff that's shown too.
Oh, he's in
are
the movie
like
more
one of the
than
things you've done in the
Batman.
last several
Read
months,
some reviews
actually.
today.
These
Yet the
Green Bay
photograph.
Packer, futurist,
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll see it eventually.
yeah,
maybe.
abstractions, and
Oh, I'm supposed to see a movie.
and
with
then
my
also
father
your
on Saturday.
Inside Out
Which one?
paintings.
But I
the,
kind of wanted to see Prometheus.
gessoed fabric
What about
or
To
gessoed
Rome with
canvas
Love?
on panel.
The
We're
the
talking
undone
about
weaving.
Pointless
Yeah.
to see a Woody Allen movie in a
Um,
theater.
yeah, I mean, I have to
it's not
say
a-
How many
that
more times
theater
are you
going
going to get to
experience.
it's
see a
really
Woody
difficult,
Allen
I
movie?
think, to be a young artist and to be.
died any minute.
It's switched in the
should
last
die
couple of
any
years. I'm
pretty
so
healthy.
thankful to be a mid-career
One of his
artist
eyes
because
is
one
something
realizes
like
when they wake up in the morning,
up with
one will
that?
still be that
What?
artist.
Yeah,
And I think
the
as
whole movie. I don't know if it's
a
makeup or
young
what,
artist,
but
you fight
it's different
very,
size
very
eyes.
hard.
What I want to
so-
know
so
is,
these new bodies of
Jesse
work, which
Eisenberg
I'm
is
quite
supposed
fond
to
of,
be
which
the
deal
Woody
with
Allen
ideas of
character.
cliche, particularly
what
with
the hell is Woody Allen
the
in the
Packer
Woody Allen?
images, but also the vernacular and the
Woody-
idea of the regular, but
he's,
also thinking through painting, construction, and
Woody
abstraction.
Allen's
Yeah, that I
ultimate
feel
story
that I
uncle
can
or
do that.
something. Doesn't make it- doesn't make
Whether
it
I
look
think
as
they're
upset, though.
extraordinarily great or not, I'm
Alternate
not quite
story
sure right now.
uncle?
But
Yeah,
they're
it's-
providing me with a way of thinking through and reaching into a kind
should
of
see it.
representation that I haven't
No,
really
it's a
seen since
renter.
maybe the pigeon drawings, which goes
a-
back
yeah,
20-some
it's a
years. So
renter streamer
how does
downloader.
representation come in
It's a
and
torrent.
be part of, not so much about repetition,
Yeah.
but about
Controversial.
a cliche or the vernacular or a
Do you
backdrop
have any,
to an existence. So, yeah.
Yeah, including that, work which
I
maybe is
know.
a transitional thing, or maybe is some
Right.
kind of exercise, is perhaps not something
Oh,
a
don't be hard
typically
on
curated
yourself.
survey show would include.
I hope we haven't
with
insulted any- I hope
kind
we
of
haven't
art
alienated
historically
all of the
oriented
watchers
curator might want to kind of
tonight.
put some caps on an end, and this
Yeah.
is this body of work.
think we
but
have.
That's another
By making them
interesting
listen to
outcome
us.
of this unconventional approach is to
It's
kind
strange
of leave
that
some
when we're
open
not
questions. Because
giving
it
people
is,
endless
as you
amounts of
described,
food
this
and booze, that it
process, and
seems
it's
like they don't want to
ongoing,
listen to
and,
us
we
talk.
get a sense of who you are.
Well,
Whereas
throughout
at
the
the
entire
reading stage,
exhibition, and maybe
our
also
introductions
what's
could run
still
2-3
going on
minutes
in
if we
the
had them.
streaming.
Yeah, I know the
fed
idea of
and
a
look it up
mid-career
enough.
to fix a narrative
Yeah.
was just
Weird how that
kept me
works.
up at night.
How would you say our
And
reading
you're right, that's what a
introduction
catalog is
styles
for. I mean,
differ?
catalogs do that.
Yeah, I was going to say, speaking of open questions,
Well,
we
first
have
I'd
a
like to
forthcoming
say
catalog
that
that I should plug right now.
They were similar
That's,
in that neither of us really
an
ever said
open
anything
it's
about
unfinished, but it is.
reader.
It will. There,
I
there's
sort of
obviously
tried to
new
memorize things and then forgot and babbled
new
and you read poems.
evaluations or essays
that
on
you
Michelle's
wrote, but
work.
I don't remember
and
anyone actually
there's
talking much
things that
about
Michelle
the
published
reader.
about other people's
He had much more
work
preparation than I did.
and
Much
historical
like
stuff that
tonight, I
people
always thought I
published
could
about
wing
Michelle's
it,
work.
but
So
then
again,
at the last
kind
minute, the
of
winging
looking at
is,
things from a bunch of different angles and kind of being open to.
Oh, I'm kind of basically
Right, and
winging it.
embedded in the catalog,
That's
this is something that I
basically
take,
what I'm
and it
doing.
kind of
I know.
happened
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can tell. Like everyone can
consciously,
tell.
semi-consciously.
half of the show
Nick
was
Frank,
really bad.
who was
thought it was great.
an
Unctuous-
important colleague of mine
unctuous bull,
and
yeah.
Brad's when we were
Yeah,
when we
that
moved
was
back
probably
to
the high
Chicago and ran the
point.
Hermetic
I think
Gallery,
so.
which a lot
It's a
of
great
this
high
work
point
comes
on
from,
what-
has been writing about about my work.
I'm thinking about
over,
just making the
20
show.
years. So we're having kind of a mini survey of
I
his writing about
read
my work
something
within the
from
catalog. It's a
Or I
beautiful
read
thing. So
things
it's
from
Nick's
start to
kind of
finish
survey of
and don't
writing
say who I
as well.
am
So to see
and
how
don't say the
the
name of the
language
show.
changes, how Nick uses language, that
And,
will have changed
Well,
as well. So
you're
kind
a
of a great thing.
professional
Yeah.
talker, and that's obvious.
This might be a good time to open up
here.
for your
I'm a
questions.
professional captionist.
Don't you talk?
Yeah, but I don't even know if I consider that captioning. It's just kind of zombie mouth movement with sound.
But I think, but either you've practiced reading these poems a great deal,
That's
or
good.
it's
That's
expertise.
what I was going for.
Oh no, I read the poem a couple of times today. I don't want to go in cold.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, cold read.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
That Lisa Robertson, she can come with the $3 words. You got to be prepared.
Yeah. Unctuous bullion.
Yeah. I think that's the phrase of the night. What does unctuous mean? Do you? I don't
Yeah.
actually know.
Yeah, I
Unctuous?
think I think of it as,
I know
as I was calling it
bouillon
before,
is
like a corpus,
soup.
a single thing. Like it's one. It's not. And I think John made that nice
Unctuous.
analogy that
Unctuous,
they were each marks, which
is
I
it
didn't
like
even
smell?
think about,
Is
or
it like
each one of
savory?
those things. But
Savoriness, smelliness? Does this have?
you know,
does this
it
machine have
does a
internet?
handful of things, and I think one of them is
Or
it
can't record
when
and
it
Google
functions
at the
as this
same time?
big
I
geometry.
don't know
If those
it'll
are
come
the
up
options,
I
that.
think
we
that's
should just
important to the
ditch the
space. I
recording
mean,
and
let's face
Google
it.
it
I mean, one of
and
the
come
things I
back.
hate dealing
Yeah.
with, but that's
Well,
how does
we're
one
almost done, but
activate?
it said my
given,
internet strength is low.
Contacts of any space.
But,
And this, everybody
yeah.
loves
No,
this space. I
there's
think it's
no
hugely
options.
problematic. I mean, this is a hard
So
place. This
I
is a
think
hard
it
space to
means
work.
savory. You think
with
it
the
means
walls and
savory
moving
like
around. I mean,
mushrooms. Or no, you
again,
didn't say that.
being
I
a
said
little
that.
mawkish,
Yeah.
thinking about
I
the
said-
old Tudor schoolhouse
not-
that
that's
used to be,
good, though.
that I was a
Yes,
project
savory like a
assistant at a long
mushroom.
time ago.
Savory like a
very
mushroom.
intimate.
Umami.
So
What
that
would you
that
say
is
is the
one
most
explanation, I
expensive
think,
mushroom
Patricia,
you've
so
ever
that it
eaten?
just needed to take on a big, almost
I don't know.
muralesque
Something from
body.
Hinterland on Erie Street.
And then
Hinterland?
actually, on the
Hinterland.
checklist, not even, articulate.
Which
just,
means a
it's
kind
an
of
untitled
outlying area
installation
in
with
the
a range of
country.
dates
Yeah, it's
and
very
not
central in
even
the city, which is
giving
odd.
kind of
Have you been to Odd Duck?
specifics to each one of those
Yeah,
works. I
and
mean, they
it was
can be
good?
gotten if you needed to know what
great.
one of the
Do you get
photographs were, but
sponsorships? They keep saying
not
businesses and
even
their
kind
addresses,
of
or is
giving
that
them
not
that
gonna get me
kind of
anywhere?
Yeah, I wish I
authority,
got some
that
money
they all
for
kind of participate
sponsorship or
in
product
something
placement.
bigger,
Gap underwear.
something that is
Gap
yet
underwear?
to keep
Yeah.
growing.
Is that what
and
you're wearing
something.
right
So
now?
It's not. I
that's
wish
kind
it
of
was,
how
but I need a
see it.
sponsorship so I can afford it. It's great stuff.
Are you going commando right now? Is that what you're
Body.
saying?
No, I don't.
Oh, I think it's maybe a wall installation.
Yeah, untitled wall installation.
What time is it?
What's this Gap underwear? Is it,
It
just
says
like
what,
jockey shorts? or-
90,
Is there something
93 to
special about it?
2012.
Great.
Oh, it says that. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. No, they're on the checklist.
Like it really
Like
cradles
tailored, like
your,
it's tailored
your-
for my
your
my body.
cargo. Are you saying you have an
Right.
underwear tailor?
It feels like I do when I wear
Yeah.
Gap underwear.
It like measures all the parts of
We're
your
trying to give you
body.
as much information as possible.
It's an old
in
Italian man.
The space provided.
He's 85 years
So-
old.
Visual information.
And also, I think, like I said earlier, we did this because we wanted to
unctuous.
see what it looked. We wanted to
excessively
learn
or
what would happen.
Ingratiatingly
We wanted it to
flattering.
be
Oily. Oily bouillon.
something that we
Or
could.
flattering bullying.
I mean, I was interested in
Yeah.
all these different layers of
Having a
like, I
greasy or
guess,
soapy
topics
feel.
and information that Michelle is embedding in
I've
her
heard
work.
that some
and
people don't like cilantro
seeing
because they
different
think
series
it's
from
too
different
soapy
periods next to
taste,
each other help kind of
which is weird to me.
highlight
Yeah.
those different paths.
I've heard that about
and I think that you're
chamomile
gonna
tea, but
probably
that
see
makes more
stuff
sense than
different
cilantro.
from What I
Yeah.
see,
I
what
would,
Michelle
I would,
sees.
I would love a nice cilantro soup.
CLCs.
Or soap. Or soup.
Yeah, I made some beans with cilantro
Yeah, cilantro.
today. For some tacos.
I heard dill soap is a nice soap. So Carolyn
Really?
likes. Carolyn Elmer, Woodland Pattern Book Center. Carolyn Elmer likes a
Yeah,
nice
that's
dill
right.
soap.
She uses dill soap.
Yes.
Wow. Can you?
Yeah, a
like,
little
smell it
wonky
when
in that
she
in
walks
that
by? Do you,
that
like,
mobile.
sniff
It's
the
funny
air,
because
kinda?
again, very early on in my
That's a
painting
very
career, right
vulgar
out of
image,
grad
like,
school and in my
of it, but
studio basement in River West,
You
I was
kind of-
painting.
You can like
again,
kind of the
being
dill
much more
wafts
literal,
off of her.
the subject matter of woven rugs.
Yes.
Right,
She's very
and
dill-
and it's very funny how these are
unctuously
not
dilly.
that, but they start to evoke
She's
that.
real dilly barb.
So I had
Does it
Oh,
make
now
you-
particular subject
just to
matter.
update, there's now
And then it
police
was only
officers shining
2004
flashlights
in
walking
which
down the
I
street
was
here on Center Street.
creating these
Oh.
Archimedes
Lock our doors,
spirals
windows.
Somebody lost
on
their
squares, on a
contacts.
stretched
That's probably
square
what it
canvas,
is.
and
Well,
having
there's
this
somebody in the
figure ground
backyard there. I
problem
used
that
to
was
live in that building.
really I was struggling
You
with
did? Oh, yeah.
that
Where the
the
spoken
obvious
cycles used to be.
Yep.
the thing that I
Yeah.
avoided, which
Yeah, maybe
art
it's straight-
hasn't,
that's probably-
was
it's probably just
Chando, the
straight
idea of a
cap.
round support, and I think we're seeing a lot of it in contemporary art, but that
Well,
has more
what do
to
you say
do
we
with
wrap it up?
the free market economy, where
It's
artists are really kind of
10:55.
moving
They're gonna
around
close
and
the store,
trying
so
things
as
out
much as I know you
in
wanna-
ways they never have.
I'd like
It's
to
kind of
apologize to the
amazing
Helger
and
Nation.
breakneck speed within the contemporary art world. So you're seeing a lot
This
of
is a long time coming,
return
and
of
we
this,
had a
the
lot of people
Tondo, which is a
waiting to hear
classic
the
Renaissance
true story behind
support.
the Helger
So,
Safran feud. And,
yeah, so I would like to say 2003,
we have to-
2004, when I wanted
next
to get
hour,
rid of a
that's
figured
available
ground
from iTunes,
problem,
99
the
cents.
round
That's where we're
support
really
came
gonna get
to
into
the
the
fore.
details of it.
And then to use it as kind of a punctuation point and
step
becoming
outside your
really
porch,
enthralled
unless
with
you
the
live in River
idea
West,
of
and then lock your doors, but
Gertrude
otherwise,
Stein and the
beautiful
idea of
nights,
the period and
72
how that works
degrees
with
now. The
punctuation.
mist has
So you
stopped,
have
but,
not only, you know, the
I
plain,
should
should-
call you for regular weather
the
updates.
canvas,
Do you do the
but it
weather?
can also
Am I-
work as
am
an
I
object.
repeating the weather?
No, I
Oh.
never do the weather.
Just
I
do
was
the
I was
weather.
thinking of
Yeah.
calling John Coletti to have like a sports talk minute with him.
Thank you.
For weather updates.
I would love that. I would love that.
All right. Well, perhaps we can look forward to that in the future.
Perhaps we can.
But I'm going to sign off now. So thanks for coming on the show, Carl.
Thanks, Michael. I'm sorry to disappoint you and everyone else.
I'm not disappointed.
Should be.
All right. Well, I'll try to be. All right. Well, good night and good
Hauser.
Good Hauser.
A mid-career retrospective, not focus on that which I'm known about.
Right. No, that was the great opportunity, particularly with Innova and UWM, which, you know, I feel really close to. I mean, it looms big in my heart, so it's almost familial in a way that I didn't. You know, the hardest thing, Jack, would be to, you know, if it's a museum, I don't have a relationship with an institution where you have the authority figure of the curator. You know, you play it clean. Like here, this is like a family, so I was able to take chances in which I wouldn't otherwise. But it is interesting what you bring up, and something actually I'm going to be thinking about on my drive up to the Poor Farm after this is how the commercial art world over the last 20 years brought some of that work to the fore, and some of it didn't leave the studio. And what is that about? In terms of, is that about taste? Is that about the marketplace? Is that about, you know, my dealer or dealers who I had? I mean, and Shane Campbell was here last night on his way up to Minneapolis, and you know, his comment was, in these paper weavings, I do these all the time. I've been doing them for 20 years, and I continue to do them almost as an exercise. And he said, you know, let's just cover the floor in the gallery in Chicago with these. This is the new thing. And I'm thinking, like, it's not really the new thing, but, you know, that's interesting. and then, you know, the photographs, she's like, terrible. You just got to get over that. You just got to get over those photographs. But that speaks to the power of, you know, the authority of the dealer, what they need, what their tastes are, who their clients are. John, God bless him, on the other hand, he loves the photographs, which I do too. So, right.
No.
Right. So, but as you're saying, you know, that's so interesting to me. You get an opportunity to see how the reality of the commercial art world really impacts how you know, how one is defined out in that world. And that's only one truth. That's what's so interesting about it. And it's a reality, but you know, I see a lot of artists who get really frustrated with the fact that, you know, that's not everything, you know, but you know, the art market can't put forward everything. It's a business, right? It's an exchange. So interesting to be able to think about that. Yeah, and what gets placed in institutions, what doesn't.
Mid-career disclosure show.
Yes, yes, exactly. Revealing.
Hello. Okay, what? You're not on the air though? Can you hear me? Hello. Yeah. Hello. So you give it again. Yeah. Okay. You got me? Okay. Hey.
And the fact that the building over on Center created a synergy that he's not sure Bill Lawson will be able to aid him in getting back. And I'm just wondering, especially based on your experience in and out of Milwaukee, opening up your community elsewhere, and things of that nature, what your thoughts are on if this is indeed
Yeah, you know, of course they'll change, and they would if there wasn't a fire, but the fire is going to, you know, something's going to unfold in a more drastic, visible, tracking way. We can track it and more immediately over, as opposed to it being protracted over a long period of time. I don't think it's a bad thing. I have huge trust in all those people who were displaced.